So I am reading directly from Isabel and the Rogue. This is the start of chapter 5. Isabel and her younger sister, Gabby, are at Epsom Downs. They're at a horse race. And Isabel, I never flat out say it, but I think it's alluded to more than once that she's neurodiverse. I don't want to, I'm not trying to diagnose her, but I've always kind of, in my mind, she was always on the spectrum somewhere. So it's a little noisy. She's a little overwhelmed. So that's the setup for this scene. So the day was unseasonably warm, and for at least the 10th time since she stepped from the house, Isabel cursed the fact that she was required to wear so many layers of clothing. Sweat beaded on her brow, and she fanned her face faster, as if the thick, balmy air would somehow cool her. She had wandered away from the spectator box where Lady Yardley chatted with Tio Arturo and several members of the ton. Isabel couldn't quite remember who had invited them, but after drinking 3 glasses of ice-cold lemonade, she decided she needed a break from the noise and crowds. Escape was much harder to find than Isabel had expected. Epsom Downs was a veritable party, with rows of stands selling kites, a rainbow assortment of treats, including fluffy marshmallows, various comfits, bonbons, pear drops, and peppermints. There were even milliner stalls with fine bonnets and hats, cobblers showcasing the newest footwear trends from Paris, and flower merchants selling bright blooms of every colorful shade. Isabel had spied more than one woman with a fresh rose in her bonnet, or a young man with a daisy pinned to his lapel. In addition to the peddlers and merchants, there were clowns doing silly magic tricks for children, jugglers awing the crowd with their acts, and even a makeshift museum of oddities collected from all over the world. Gabby had squealed with delight over the various entertainments, but Isabel had not known where to look. Her gaze jumped from one sight to the next, the cacophony of voices a slowly building buzz, until she was forced to press her palms to her ears to muffle the sound. Without taking leave of Gabby, Lady Yardley, or even her uncle, Isabel weaved and darted her way across the lawn towards the shaded canopy of a large oak tree near the edge of the paddocks. As she stepped under its boughs, Isabel ripped the bonnet from her head and swiped the back of her hand across her forehead. "Are you all right?" Gabby asked, panting slightly as she came to a stop by her side. "Feeling a bit overwhelmed?" Isabel nodded. She had known her sister would ascertain what was wrong. Running away from social gatherings was something Isabel had excelled at. "Well, you look as miserable as I feel," Gabby said. "I thought you were enjoying the sights," Isabel said, stripping her gloves from her hands to swipe her palms down her skirts. Her sister sighed as she looked out across the crowd. "Oh, if I were free to wander about and enjoy the festivities without worrying who may see me and the inferences they may make about my interests or behavior, I'm certain I'd be having a grand time." A swell of affection surged in Isabel's chest. "I'm sorry that everything you do must be a performance." Reaching into her reticule, Gabby extracted a white handkerchief embroidered with ivy and patted her face and the hollow of her neck. "Yes, well, at least we have this short reprieve." With a long exhale, Isabel set her hat back on her head and worked to recreate the bow her maid had tied earlier that day. "Do I really look miserable?" "No, you look perfectly lovely." Gabby batted her hands away and set about tying the bow under her sister's chin. "But I know you, so I know you're out of sorts. I doubt anyone else can tell." "That's because no one pays any attention to my presence," Isabel said without thought. She bit down on her tongue when she noticed her sister frown. "Is that what you believe? That you're invisible?" Gabby questioned, her brows pulled low. "Does it matter?" she grumbled, looking away. "I think it matters to you." Isabel narrowed her eyes at her sister. "Why would you think that? Why should I care about the opinions of people who think I'm beneath them? Because my skin is darker than theirs? People who think our country deserved to be invaded for no other reason than we're different from them?" Gabby didn't speak, although her hazel eyes were glassy as they stared back at her. Smacking her glove against her thigh, Isabel stepped back and spun about in a circle. "This is not my home, and these are not my people. I could not care less if they bestow their fickle attentions on me." A weight pressed down on her shoulders then, and it felt as if she were being watched. Darting her gaze about, she swallowed a gasp when it collided with Captain Dawson's. He stood in the company of finely dressed people in a private box lining the center of the track, far above the rabble that crowded the inner field, much like the box she and Gabby had fled. How had he spied her among the throngs of people? And if his pursed lips were any indication, he had witnessed her peak of temper. Knowing he had been watching while she vented her frustrations made Isabel even more frustrated. Why could she not escape the man? But do you really want to? After their last conversation, Isabel felt it difficult to drum up the animosity she usually felt when she thought of the captain. It's a good thing we're speaking in Spanish, or else everyone in earshot will know of your fiery temper, Gabby said quietly, a hint of laughter in her voice. Pointedly turning away from Captain Dawson, Isabel tucked an errant lock of hair behind her hairdo before sliding her hands down her skirts again. I would not at all be surprised if the gossip rags recruited Spanish speakers to follow us around and report on our private conversations. Mark my words, it will eventually come to that. Gabby groaned. You're probably right. The papers here are positively ruthless. You're being too generous. A lowering thought. Her sister approached until she was close enough to whisper in Isabel's ear. There's nothing wrong with caring about the opinions of others, especially if they're people who care about you. Isabel met Gabby's eyes and swallowed. That would make for a very small number of people. Could that group possibly contain 5 people and a dog? At Isabel's smothered laugh, Gabby pressed a quick kiss to her cheek. I think your group has more members than that. Isabel scowled. Why do you think that? Gabby lifted a shoulder. Just a feeling I have. A feeling, huh? Isabel shook her head. Well, whatever prompted that feeling, I suspect it's wrong. Always so pessimistic. Ouch. Isabel pulled back to spear her sister with a look. And coming from one of the most critical people I know. I assure you, Isa, dear, Gabby said, patting her hand, that however critical you may think I am of others, I am doubly critical of myself. Looping her arm around Gabby's shoulders, Isabel pulled her close to her side. That's merely because you have high standards for yourself and others. That's a gracious way of considering it, querida. Her sister's shoulders sank with a sigh. Do you suppose Lady Yardley and Theo Arturo will allow us to hide here in the shade for the rest of the race? I doubt it. Theo mentioned several important members of Parliament would be in attendance today, and he wanted us to greet them with, as he said, our most charming smiles. Isabel grunted, as if there's anything charming about me. I think he may have confused me with Anna, who possesses more charisma in her little finger than I do in my whole body. Stop it, Isa. Isabel jerked her head back. Perdóname? I hate when you do that. Talk bad about yourself as if you aren't intelligent and interesting, as if you don't casually toss out in conversations the most obscure and fascinating bits of information, Gabby said with a sweep of her hand. But surely you see how I put people to sleep when they converse with me, Isabel scoffed. I never know what to say or how to act when I'm with them, and it always feels as if they're staring at me like I'm some exhibit in the British Museum because my nerves make me ramble. It's so disconcerting. That's because the ton is full of half-wits. Gabby grasped her arm and shook it. Their idea of interesting is someone choosing to wear an ascot instead of a cravat. They care for nothing that doesn't affect their carefully cultivated and manicured social circle. Isabel didn't know what to say because her sister was right. I thought you didn't care about their opinions. Gabby winged up a brow. They're not our people, I seem to recall you saying. A sound resembling a groan, or maybe even a growl, left Isabel's lips, and she covered her face with her hands. I don't make any sense, even to myself, especially to myself. Isa, Gabby sighed, her muffled steps on the grass making it clear she was moving closer. You make sense to me. I know that while you might not want the good opinions of these people, we can't escape the truth that their opinion can be a benefit or a curse, especially now that the precarious situation at home feels so much more real. That was it exactly. Knowing that their parents' safety, the very future of Mexico's independence was on the line made Isabel doubly aware of her shortcomings. Not only had she failed to supply any information to Fernando, she'd also fallen short of winning the approval of the very people who could aid her countrymen. Disgust with herself festered in her gut, and that disgust made her defensive. How much easier would life be here if I were like you? As a darling of the ton, Isabel slashed her hand through the air. Your admirers overfill the drawing room during visiting hours, and your dance card is always full. Their favor is readily given to you. Gabby shook her head as she glanced down at her feet. And yet I don't want their attentions. I wouldn't be courting their good opinion now if I didn't feel I had to. The only people whose approval I've ever tried to win has ignored me as if I was no better than a piece of furniture or a painting on the wall. Flinching, Isabel exhaled forcibly. Aren't we an unfortunate pair, desiring father's approval as if he could ever be bothered to bestow it? Not unfortunate, perhaps misguided. The light in Gabby's eyes dimmed as she looked at her. Whatever the truth is, please know that I admire you, Isa, and it breaks my heart that you think so cheaply of yourself. Swallowing proved impossible around the knot in her throat. Instead, Isabel bit her lip and closed her eyes, completely overwhelmed by Gabby's confession.